I'm Kyle Ruddy, Senior Technical Marketing Engineer, and I cover PowerCLI as well as all of our SDKs and APIs for vSphere.
If you thought the line out front was for the rubric party of last night, mile long, anybody see that? Crazy. So this session is PowerCLI 101. It is your first step into using PowerCLI and breaking that bad habit of using the GUI, whether it's the web client or the C# client, which is going away eventually, someday. We have PowerCLI main looking over us here in this session. So praise be to PowerCLI main. Normal disclaimer slide. Basically, don't trade VMware stock based on what we're going to be talking about here. Don't make any purchases for anything that may or may not come to pass, etc. All right. So there's two things that I really want you to take away from this session, because we're not going to be able to get you up to par on PowerCLI in 45 minutes. So the two things are, I want you to be able to find out where to find more information to continue that learning process, and also get plugged into the community. Those are those two things. So I also really want to talk about the value of PowerCLI. And there have been some really valuable things that I found in my journey with PowerCLI. So I've been a PowerCLI user for about 8 years now. And I've grown to love it, and obviously I'm the product manager now for it. I love it so much. But it has been my go-to user interface for managing my VMware environment. Two very cool projects that we have out in the community are first vCheck. Any vCheck users out there? So look around, look at all the hands going up. So vCheck is a very cool open reporting framework using PowerCLI to just get all the information about your environment. You can go through and check, make sure everything has correct values. Beautiful HTML formatted page that it creates. Depending on the size of your environment, it may take 20 minutes, may take an hour to run. I mean, it's pretty awesome. The second, we have hundreds of PowerCLI examples on GitHub under the PowerCLI example scripts. So go check those out and contribute. Any PowerCLI examples script contributors in here? Anybody? All right, so everybody's got to go out and do that. Check out the scripts that are in there and contribute back, because the community is what makes PowerCLI awesome. PowerCLI has the biggest community both in the PowerShell world and also inside the VMware user world.
So, and to kick this off, we kind of wanted to show something that was really cool, and to kind of go back to some of the things that we think are interesting, or that kind of got us started going down the path of being interested in not just automation, but PowerCLI specifically. So up here we have a demo that's going to run through. Obviously I'm not going to do it live because there are some things that may or may not have been sped up for your guys' consumption. But so let me hit the play button on here again.
What are we doing here, Kyle?
So this one we're going to go through. We're going to get our cluster, which is the commandlets that you guys can see up here. Hopefully the folks in the back can actually see those. So we're going to get our cluster. We're going to store that into a variable. This PowerShell variable is something that we can recall for later use. We can see that used on the next line there. So we're going to see, check out our hosts, see how many hosts we have, and then we're going to do something pretty cool and roll through them, put them all in maintenance mode, or one by one put them in maintenance mode, take them out of maintenance mode, and watch as even the VMs start moving around.
So this is a full automatic rolling maintenance mode.
My cursor is gone. Where did it go? There it is. There we go. All right, so we can see that we have 16 hosts. And this is also a good use of showing how PowerCLI works with PowerShell natively. That's, PowerCLI is built on top of PowerShell. So I created a function that it's this thing called initialize cluster maintenance loop. So it's going out. We could see that the first ESXi, actually we're already onto the second one. Just went into maintenance mode, was kicked out of maintenance mode. Host number 3 is now going into maintenance mode. So this is something that I created, and really anybody can create because it's just PowerCLI, the high-level commandlets underneath the covers here that's really just doing the work. But this is something that, it seems like not a really big deal, but when you watch it go through, this is really cool. You can use this for several different reasons. You can do firmware updates, you can do things like patching, so on and so forth. But it's just a really cool use of how automation can take something that's, maybe a trivial task and turn it into something that's not just easy to use and easy to reuse, but it's also kind of fun to watch it go through here. So where are we at? We are on host 8 here. But, so this is kind of a cool example of using PowerCLI in an actual environment. When I got started with PowerCLI, it was pretty much to do something along these lines. Starting to do stuff at scale. We're starting to do things in a repeated fashion that kind of took the human error out of things and made it more consistent. And so that's what this guy is doing. Anything to add?
No, bulk actions like this are what got me really excited about PowerCLI. So, starting out safe with doing reporting, like with VCheck and stuff like that, and then being able to turn around and do bulk actions like rolling maintenance mode on hosts. That's amazing, especially if you have greater than 20 hosts. It becomes almost essential.
So there, and it hits our last host. And it just prints out and says, hey. All right, so here's another kind of really cool example that I enjoy. So we can see off to the left-hand side here, we have a vCenter server, a vCSA in this case, which is empty. Nothing is configured there. Off to our right, we're using PowerShell ISE to actually go through and create some things. So now we can see our data center being created. We can see our cluster being created. We can go through and select these one-liners here to add a VM host into this newly created infrastructure. But that's not it. We're not just adding hosts. We're actually going to turn on vSAN. So we can actually automate the whole the life cycle of vSAN. So this is how good PowerCLI is at working with a bunch of VMware products. So it's not just vSphere. We're talking vSAN. We're talking distributed switching, NSX. Well, I shouldn't say NSX. That's a community module. VROps, Horizon View, and a couple other areas like vCloud Air. So at this point, we just saw that the vSAN cluster is enabled. We're going to create some fault domains here. So this is how granular our automation process here can get to. Now we're going to create a VM here. And I believe we're going to apply a storage policy to it. So we're even able to create our SPVM policies and apply them to, in this case, our test VM. We can see that the VM that was just newly created is also in a status of compliance. We can do things like get back just the space utilization on the vSAN cluster itself. And then lastly, we can go through and check the HCL database. So, we did all of these actions and we never once touched the web client. The web client was only there just to show you that this was indeed happening and I'm not just there typing stuff in.
So what just happened there? We created a whole vSAN cluster from scratch?
We created basically an entire vCenter build-out. Data center, cluster, added hosts, created the storage, created VMs. Whole entire process, automated.
So hopefully that wet your whistle a little bit about what PowerCLI can do for you. The possibilities are endless. Let's dig a little bit deeper about what PowerCLI is underneath the covers. So in order to understand that, we need to understand what PowerShell is. So Microsoft PowerShell started off as sort of a proof of concept in Microsoft for making systems administration easier. So back in the day, you had Perl, sed, awk, VB script. Any VB scripters out there? Yeah. So Jeffrey Snover's vision for systems administration was to simplify and abstract this out. And he wrote this paper called the Monad Manifest. And the Monad Manifest is what eventually became PowerShell and has turned into Microsoft's basic framework for managing all of their operating systems. So what is PowerShell? So PowerShell has a model, it has a language, and it has a scripting engine. So we'll talk about the model a little bit. The language has some very basic syntax. We won't dive too into the syntax today. There are really good books and references that we'll mention today that you can to go read. And then the scripting engine, not only is it interactive, but you can actually save your scripts off in files and then run them later. So let's talk about this PowerShell model, because this is really important and a drastic change from where things used to be with systems administration. First of all, in the PowerShell model, everything is an object. So if you sort of come from the Unix, Linux background, you understand text parsing. You understand regex. You could probably write, a regex for, an IP address like right off the top of your head, just because text parsing is how things got done. With PowerShell, everything being an object, objects have properties and they have methods. So instead of having to parse out text from a log file or something like that, you can just go to the property for that particular piece of information that you want. So the other thing to know about PowerShell is that instead of commands like separate tools like sed and awk, PowerShell brings all of those tools together inside something called commandlets. And commandlets are basically just small executable tools built into PowerShell. They're very easy to write. You can write them yourself. And a group of commandlets together can be put together into a module, and those modules can then be published and shared amongst the community. The other thing to know that's really awesome about PowerShell is every single commandlet is noun-verb. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Oh, that's really who did that? It's verb-noun.
I'm glad we're here for this.
I know, right?
I'm glad we're in the 101 session.
So verb-noun. Who's taking pictures of this slide? So verbs, there are a common set of verbs inside PowerShell. Get, set, invoke, things that we're going to do to it. There are a couple that are sort of wishy-washy, but like for each, that's not really a verb, but you get the gist. The nouns can be anything. So, from a VMware vocabulary standpoint, we've got VM, we've got cluster, we've got resource pool, we've got VD switches. Are they VD switches? It's changed a lot the last few years. So
VD switch for the commandlet.
Yeah.
Data stores.
And if you ever want to know what commands are out there, it's literally just get-command. Pretty simple, right? So you can do a lot of sort of guessing as to how to do stuff without having to know. I keep picking on sed and awk, but has anybody used sed or awk before? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. All right. So I mentioned this extensibility through modules. So we have a bunch of different commandlets, and we put those commandlets into modules. And this is what VMware's PowerShell modules look like today. So there are over 600 commandlets in PowerCLI today. And PowerCLI is this group of PowerShell modules that you see here. So you can see that most of the work has been done in the core module, and that's what everybody uses mostly. And we're growing the rest of these with every release. All right, so we're going to dive into installation and upgrade. I'll hand this over to Kyle to talk about. I think you have another demo for us, Kyle.
Yes, yes. Big fan of demos, especially when they're this easy. So first and foremost, if you already have PowerCLI installed, go ahead and uninstall it. Just get that out of the way. So that's what this process is doing right here. And then there is one additional step that is remaining on top of that, which now that we've got PowerCLI uninstalled, we're going to go ahead and look into our file explorer here. Go to C, Program Files, x86, VMware. There we go. And then Infrastructure. If you see this folder right there, delete that as well. You want to get rid of any remnant of PowerCLI that used to be there. Now, we can open up a PowerShell session. In this case, I'm doing a PS version table. That's a variable that's built into PowerShell to show that we are running version 5, as evidenced by PS version there at the top. Doing a get module VMware asterisk and list available is going to say, hey, if you have any modules that are registered that are titled VMware anything else, wildcard, we're going to display those. Next, we're going to do a find module. This is going to go out and talk to the PowerShell gallery. And we're looking for a module by the name of VMware.PowerCLI. If this is the first time talking to the PowerShell gallery, it'll ask you to update your NuGet provider. That's just how you talk to that's the underlying components that talk to the PowerShell gallery. Then, the installation. It is literally install-module name VMware.PowerCLI. If you don't have admin rights on your system or you only want to limit it to that specific user, use scope and current user. And at that point, we can redo our get module. Okay, it did stay. Yay. Okay, so then we can do our get module, and we can see the 18 different modules that are out there and available that Jig just covered. So now you have access to it. So, you know, if you're having had installed PowerCLI before, you probably remember or maybe have nightmares about going out to myvmware.com, trying to find which version of PowerCLI that you were looking for, which one was the latest, which one was the greatest, downloading it, and then running an MSI that did all kinds of things underneath the covers. Because we have switched to being all module based, this allows for us to do this to your installation process. So literally you're installing PowerCLI through PowerShell, which is a fantastic upgrade and really streamlines the whole process of getting access to PowerCLI.
Yeah, the PowerShell gallery is a more recent development too. So what this allows us to do from a development standpoint is, in the past, we've had to bundle everything up in an MSI. And because we were releasing every single module every single time, it means we had to go through all this regression testing. So imagine having to test over 600 commandlets against every single version of supported vSphere and every other product on 4 or 5 different versions of Windows. And then do the math, and you end up with this Cartesian that's ridiculous. So, happy news is that now that we're in the PowerShell gallery, my team can release one module at a time here. So we don't have to do regression testing for every single thing every single time. We can release one module and get features out to you more frequently. So that's the power of the gallery.
And one thing to tag onto there that Jake just mentioned, as part of the regression testing process, going out and checking all of the compatible or supported versions of vSphere on our other products, you know, this is another thing that makes PowerCLI really special, because every time we release a version of PowerCLI, we support every version of vSphere or every version of the software components that are out there that PowerCLI can operate with that are supported by VMware. So, you know, if you download 6.5.2, which is the current version that's out there, it works going back to vSphere 5.5. So that's one of those key things that you get access to any of the bug fixes, any of the performance improvements, any of the enhancements that just came about. So that's really important when you're out there and you're trying to figure out, you know, okay, so which version do I download? It's always the latest and greatest, because it will always be supporting whatever's in your environment as long as it's supported by VMware.
speaking, supporting latest and greatest, it would be really interesting if, maybe in the future, PowerCLI was on multiple platforms like Mac OS and Linux.
That would be very
cool.
interesting.
It'd be the same installation across every single platform.
It would
Pretty
be
fun. All right, so this is where we get into the learning resources. How do I continue my PowerCLI education? Hopefully you've seen some value so far. You're like, Jake, I'm a believer in PowerCLI, man. What do I do next? What are my next steps to continue on with this? And it's like working a muscle. You're going to be sore some days, and you're not going to want to do it. You're going to want to fall back to that GUI crutch that you've been on for so many years, but you got to fight it. And here's some ways to fight it. Kyle, you want to talk about some of these?
Sure. So some of my favorite resources are listed up here on the screen here. Because PowerCLI operates on top of, it extends Windows PowerShell. You probably want to have a good foundation for how PowerShell operates and how you can put it to use in your environment. So a great recommendation is to learn Windows PowerShell in a month of lunches. Now this is something that's created and published by, currently it's Don Jones and Jeffrey Hicks. I believe it's on its third iteration or third version, and they've had a couple different authors, but this is the current one that's out there. It's a really great resource to help you just get started using PowerShell, and it's supposed to be consumed in small chunks, in small time periods, so that you're not chunking or getting to the point where you're looking and you're like, whoa, I need to spend how many hours taking a look at this. So it's really nice in that area. Another really great book, once you start getting into the PowerCLI side of things, is our vSphere PowerCLI reference, which is also titled Automating for the vSphere Administration. That's by Alan Renouf, Glenn Sizemore, Jonathan Mead, Luke Deakins, and a couple others that are very helpful in the community. And that really goes through pretty much soup to nuts around pretty much anything that PowerCLI can do at the time of release. And takes a little bit of a deep dive and gives you some examples and some tips and tricks and best practices. And then there's also the Learning PowerCLI book, second edition, by Robert. I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. But that's another really great book that really helps you get started. It gives you some good principles and gives you a good foundation on where to look, where to get started, and going down that process. You have any other books that you would recommend, Jake? I put you on the spot.
Yeah, so the PowerCLI cookbook is out there. I don't think we've mentioned that one.
Nope.
So that's under Pact Publishing, I think. And then, of course, the PowerCLI reference is amazing. Did you talk about your blog already?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Want me to? All right.
I suppose.
Another good resource is the PowerCLI blog. That's something that people like myself and Jake and Alan and some other folks are contributing to and writing articles about either new releases or maybe getting a little bit better in-depth look at some of the commandlets and things that are available to use within your own environments. Trying to basically get you guys the best tips and tricks to make use of PowerCLI in your own environment. And that's just one resource. There's a bunch of community ones that I believe we'll cover on the next slide. But I also want to call out some of the courses that are available. There is a PowerCLI-based course from VMware Education. It combines PowerCLI along with VRO or vRealize Orchestrator into, I believe it's a 5-day course. So that's it's a pretty intense workshop. It's a good resource as well. And then also Pluralsight. Pluralsight has a ton of PowerCLI resources that are out there. One of the first ones that I ever watched was by Hal Rottenberg. I think it's probably from, 2009, 2010? But one of the nice things about PowerCLI is that even though it's that old, it's still relevant. You can skip the part about, the installation piece. But, the whole idea and the premise behind using stuff like get VM host, and doing those kind of operations within your environment, they remain the same year after year, release after release. And I believe there is a new version for PowerCLI that was a new course, I should say, that was released for PowerCLI about, I think, either early August or late July. I personally haven't had a chance to look at it, but from some of the reviews that I've seen and some of the people that I've talked to that have actually gone through the course, they're giving it rave reviews. So that's another really good option as well.
So you mentioned in there, Kyle, and I want to reiterate this, the fact that PowerCLI has been unchanging for the last 10 years. PowerCLI has been around for 10 years. How amazing is that? And then you look at, GUI changes, like, GUI changes change with every, new JavaScript framework that comes out practically, right? So as career advice to you, making the investment in PowerCLI and PowerShell is worth it. It's worth it. Get it done. Community. I can't stress this enough that PowerCLI is only amazing because of the community. Like, if it weren't for the community and the mentors that I had getting started, PowerCLI would be nothing. It's really the community that makes it amazing. There's 2 different places you need to get plugged in. So first of all is the VMTN community around PowerCLI. So just vmware.com/go/PowerCLI. You're going to get 2 things there. So first of all, Luke Deakins, are you in here, bud? So, basically a forum full of Luke Deakins answering questions. Also the VMware Code Slack. So if you're not plugged into our Slack channel, the Slack channel in VMware Code for PowerCLI is very active. If you want more of an interactive sort of Q&A type thing, Kyle and I are both on there, and a bunch of great community members are on there too. And we're very inclusive. Just come on, just say hello. I don't care how introverted you are, just sort of step out of your comfort zone. It's Slack, it's all anonymous, right? All right, Kyle, we got another demo here. Let me back up here. Can I back up? Did I pause it?
You might have paused it.
All right, so if all of that convincing wasn't enough to get you started in PowerCLI, this is one last thing, one last demo that Kyle and I sort of whipped up to show you, compare. Okay, this is what the GUI looks like versus what PowerCLI looks like. So really compare the experience between the two, and the results are sort of surprising to me. So Kyle, why don't you walk us through this?
Sure, yeah. So off to the left-hand side here, we're going to be logging into the HTML5 client on a VCSA. On the right-hand side, we're opening up a PowerShell window, connecting to our vCenter server, and then what we're going to be doing is doing some management tasks for VMs. Now, these VMs are living in a resource pool. So in our PowerShell area, we can do get resource pool, followed by the name of the by the name of the resource pool itself. At that point, we do a get VM because we're taking that output from the get resource pool and saying we only want VMs from that resource pool. And at that point, we're turning them all off. Now, okay, no, it did stop. Good. So off to the right-hand side, that was the PowerCLI version. Off to the left-hand side, that was doing it in the web client. So everything was starting a new session. So we were opening a new version of a Chrome browser. We're opening up a new version, or rather a new session for PowerShell. We're initializing PowerCLI. So, even if you've been using PowerCLI for years, you probably noticed that there was no need for initialization script. There was no need for any of that. It was just automatically importing the modules. So that was kind of a cool thing. So even if you're well-versed or well-experienced with PowerCLI, that was pretty neat to see. But in the end, I probably talked over most of it. But I think the PowerCLI was faster by, like, what was it, 7 to 10 seconds. So we are actually faster by doing this in the CLI rather than doing it in the H5 client, which hopefully our PM for the H5 client isn't here because he'll be mad. But, I mean, that's just the power of using PowerCLI.
I'm playing it again, Kyle. It was too good to not watch twice. Yeah, what was surprising to me is, like sort of growing up as a junior admin in the GUI, I would have guessed that the GUI performance was going to be faster because I can just click in several different spots. and then get it done. But you know, even the performance was just really surprising that PowerCLI finished faster, because I wouldn't have expected that. I would have said, you know, the value is not necessarily, you know, getting things done faster. It's more about getting things done more consistently. But not only that, you get the consistency in performance. So this is one small example. And over time, you'll get more comfortable with using PowerCLI. And you know, there was one point that I'm just like, I don't need to use the web UI for anything anymore. So, all right. We're going to take some questions. Any burning questions that you have about getting started with PowerCLI, about the PowerCLI community? You can come up to the, yeah, go ahead and come up to the microphones.
See, and due to the lights, it's really hard to see people. So if you can use the mics, it's much appreciated.
Hi. Is there any plans to turn the NSX into more of a internally supported than a community supported? And also, is there any plans to make the Horizon commandlets accessible from, say, a workstation rather than just from the Horizon server itself?
Yeah, so our goal is to have officially supported modules for every single product that we have. So modules like Power NSX and Power VRA are really good, and eventually we want to, you know, support every single product officially. So no dates or times or anything like that, but I mean that's the goal, that's the vision.
And how about Horizon off the Horizon server?
So currently as of, I believe, it might even be 6.5, sorry, 6.5R1 or 6.5.1 took away that dependency. So there's a brand new module for Horizon View. However, the one caveat to that is this new module came about because Horizon View released their APIs to be public. So then we, as the PowerCLI team, can now consume those APIs and allow, you know, our users and our consumers to make use of them. And so that was the big key step for us to be able to enable that. Now I will also add to that, right now it is just connect HV server and disconnect HV server, and everything goes through essentially get view or extension data. However, as part of the community repository, the PowerCLI example scripts, there's a module that's out there that is called the VMware.hv.helper module, and that'll give you a whole bunch of advanced functions like get HV machine, get HV pool, things of that nature. You know, so then, you know, because we know that one of the issues with that old PowerCLI module was that, you know, one, it was inconsistent, two, it was undocumented, there were no examples, it was really just not good, just on top of only being accessible on the connection server. So this is the first step in, you know, getting rid of that and making it a whole lot better process.
Take one over here.
My question was about Horizon as well, and as a PowerCLI new user, can you give some kind of an overview of what can and cannot be done within the Horizon environment with PowerCLI as of 7.2?
So kind of a loaded question. So because it's using all of the API backend to that, the best way to look and see what is or is not available is to look at the API docs that are available out on VMware Code. Another good thing to look at is the Horizon View Helper module. Pretty much if you can do it in the API, the advanced function's been created. So that'll give you a good idea there. If you go to the bottom of the I want to say it's PSD, they exported all of the functions, so you can just read through them there instead of having to scroll through the entire thing.
Okay, fair enough, thanks.
By the way, posters and stickers for PowerCLI, if you don't have any of those yet, will be available down in the VMTN Community Center. So like the the VM Village, sort of towards the back.
That answers my second question. The first question being, for those of us that are running PowerCLI on Linux, macOS, or Docker, are we still going to have to go through the entire uninstall process?
Uninstall process.
That you had to do with Windows.
I mean, I would like to see the PowerCLI process, the install process and uninstall process be, in the gallery. I think that would be really cool. In terms of like, you're going to want to install the latest version of PowerShell anyway when they go GA. So PowerShell 6, I think they've publicly stated like November, December timeframe, they'll be GA. So you'll need to update that then. But the question was, are you going to have to uninstall
the Fling.
Yeah,
uninstall
the Fling.
Yeah, you're going to want to uninstall the Fling because first of all, it'll be a different module name, right? And you'll have some overlapping commandlets. If, say, we released PowerCLI on multi-platform, they'd be the same module names that we have today.
All right, thank you.
Had like 2 questions. The MSI installer, will that still remain for customers that are completely air-gapped and aren't able to pull the modules down?
No, the problem with the MSI that we had was that regression testing that took weeks and weeks, right? So what you'll want to do is the PowerShell gallery has save module, and then you can do save module onto an internet connected machine, and then use a network share or even an internal private PowerShell gallery that you can run internally, just like a private Yum repo, and then get the modules that way.
Okay, and then the other question that I had was, how on the web client, some of the more complex commands have like a kind of like a wizard or a dialog box, whatever, to walk you through the various steps. Almost all of them have like a finish button at the bottom. Do you know if there's any plans to incorporate basically at that finish screen the equivalent PowerCLI command so that you can, to facilitate the ability to kind of pick up PowerCLI, like, oh, I just did this complex step, it was 7 dialogues long. I'd like to see what the PowerCLI command looks like, and just like you hit a little thing and it says, this is what the PowerCLI command equivalent of all the other screens looks like. Do you know if there's any plans to incorporate that?
That would be a gorgeous concept to say, oh, by the way, here's the PowerCLI command to do that. So if you're not unfamiliar with Onyx, you should come to the What's New session because I'll talk a little bit about Onyx there. But the concept behind Onyx back in the sort of C# client days was Onyx acted as a proxy for the UI to your vCenter server. And it would you can actually watch the PowerCLI commandlets go from the UI. So Onyx is probably the solution for that. There's no support for the H5 client today. But that's certainly something that would be of great value.
If you could pass that along.
Yeah. You should come to the What's New session. Okay.
Thank you.
I've had some problems in the past with third-party stuff that was built on top of PowerCLI requiring a specific version of PowerCLI. And if you installed a newer version, it said, this is too new of a version, go back to the old version. Is there any legitimate reason the software is doing that? Is there backwards incompatibility problems in it? And is that going to, with the new release model of you don't really have defined versions, it's just sort of you get whatever's current, is that going to be a problem going forward?
Yeah, there are reasons that you would want to pin to a specific version of software. It is much easier to do that now that PowerCLI is in modules, and it's on the gallery.
Are old versions going to remain in the gallery, or is the only thing in the gallery going to be the latest?
The latest will be in the gallery. So if you've got software that's requiring an older version, those MSIs are still available on VMware.com, so you can go and get those. Okay. But I would really push on whatever that third-party vendor is to say, hey, please support the latest version of PowerCLI.
Okay. The issue I have run into in the past I know is fixed now, but I don't know if that's otherwise common.
Okay.
And is there good coverage on VMware Update Manager, vSphere Update Manager?
I have a lot of feature requests for more support. So yeah, that's definitely in the backlog for some point. Thank you.
And there is some functionality there. I will say that it's not feature complete by any means, but there is some things that are out there and available for VUM today.
So, any idea when vCloud modules are going to be coming out for the Mac Linux side?
The vCloud modules, I think, are very highly used. So, certainly we have to sort of wait and see what Microsoft does in terms of putting PowerShell 6 to general availability. And then, theoretically, if we were porting modules over to support .NET Core and PowerShell 6, then vCloud modules would be high up in the list for sure.
Okay, so a little bit after 6 then. Cool, thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Get plugged into the community. We really want to talk to you all on Slack. Thank you again for coming.